Welcome to our first Fall Women's Leadership Forum titled The Status and Experiences of Utah Women of Color. I'm Dr. Susan Madsen, Founding Director of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, and also the Karen Haight Huntsman Endowed Professor of Leadership in the John M. Huntsman School of Business at Utah State University. And I'm the host and will be the co-moderator today. This event furthers the mission of the Utah Women in Leadership Project, which is to strengthen the impact of Utah girls and women. And we serve Utah and its residents first by producing relevant, trustworthy, and applicable research. And second, creating and gathering valuable resources. And third, convening trainings and events that inform, inspire, and ignite growth and change for all Utahns. And I would like to thank our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. So I'll first begin by introducing my co-moderator today, and then we'll introduce the rest of the panelists. I'd like to welcome Nubia Peña, who is the Senior Advisor for Equity and Opportunity to the Governor Cox-Henderson administration, and she is also the Director of the Utah Division of Multicultural Affairs. She's a national training consultant dedicated to bringing awareness to the intersections of trauma and to the school to prison pipeline. She received her Juris Doctorate from the University of Utah in May 2016, and she was one of 25 law students in the nation recognized for her social justice activism. Director Peña received the National Juvenile Justice Network 2019 Emerging Leader Award and is certified by the National Juvenile Defender Center as a juvenile training immersion program facilitator. So welcome, Nubia. So after we introduce each of the panelists, I'd like to start this with Nubia. We would like each to respond to the first question. So we'll introduce one person at a time and then ask you to respond to this question. Why are you interested in and passionate about the topic of this forum, which again is the status and experiences of Utah women of color? And Nubia, I know you're co-moderating with me, but I would love to have you answer that question before we dive in and introduce the other panelists.
Absolutely. And thank you so very much, Susan, for allowing me, Dr. Madsen, for allowing me to be able to join today's conversation as a co-moderator. And again, in all of the partnership work that we've done. So just to start us off with that question, for me, it's critical as we continue to see the changing demographics in our state, the racially and ethnically diverse population is growing. And unless we have a clear understanding that women are not a monolith, but in fact, we have unique experiences that are impacting us every single day as we navigate education, career, family, life choices, we will have an incomplete picture. So your data was critical. And again, I'm looking forward to the discussion that we have today with all these brilliant expert panelists. And so with that, and with your permission, I would love to be able to introduce our very first one. So Dr. Jessi Hill. She is a broadly prepared developmentalist who studies lifespan changes in cognition. She's internationally recognized scholar on teaching and learning in higher education and an award-winning educator who incorporates culturally relevant and learner-centered teaching across delivery modalities. A published author, she teaches general psychology, cognitive psychology, and research methods. Dr. Hill won UVU's Presidential Award of Excellence for leadership in 2022 and for her work in developing women leaders at UVU and throughout Utah. As UVU's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Fellow for Student Success, she focuses on how to provide equitable access to education for marginalized groups. And so with that, Dr. Hill, we get to ask you the very same question. Why are you interested in and passionate about the status and experiences of Utah women of color?
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Madsen. Thank you, Director Peña, for giving me the opportunity to be able to contribute to this outstanding topic. It's so important. I am a Puerto Rican and I grew up in Miami. And so I'm going to take a personal take here. My parents taught me when I was growing up that I could do anything. And the world looked like me. The world sounded like me. And I really honestly believed them. And I still do. I still do. And so I honestly believe that all the way through high school, as I went through college, that belief was still there. I thought, the world was an equitable place and I could do anything. But that was a unique experience because I hit grad school and I, left South Florida, and now I'm in the Midwest, and all of a sudden, wait, the world is a very different place. I'm not a member of the majority group anymore, and my advisor in graduate school was pretty anti-woman, pretty openly anti-woman. So that was very interesting that he admitted me into his lab, and he would, admit 1 or 2 women a year, but they would be gone by their second year. They wouldn't make it past. And the development activities, the extra training activities were invitation only, and none of the women were ever invited to those things. And then once I started realizing, oh, wait, my growing up experience was very different than the actual real world experience, I started seeing inequities more and more around me. And that did not resonate well. I am a fan of equity. And so I started thinking back to my roots. Wait, my parents taught me I can do anything, I can make a difference. And so I started trying to do that, whether it was in my classroom by using inclusive pedagogies that allowed people from marginalized groups to feel included and to be able to learn and respond in a way that is appropriate to their culture, or whether it is through something more formal like the Utah Women's Leadership Exchange that I co-founded and co-direct with Nancy Hauk from Utah Tech University now. So really, that's where my passion comes from. My parents instilled it in me. When I rail at the injustices of the world, it's just reinforced, and just a deep belief in equity.
Thank you so much. I'll introduce the next. Xiao Panoke serves as Senior Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for Zions Bank. She's the founder of Rethink International, a global social enterprise and international training organization designed to challenge people to rethink how and what they think. She has trained thousands of leaders around the world. Additionally, she founded Rethink Tank, a social think tank, and Women Politics Media, a global leadership and media training organization. So she serves on multiple boards and commissions. She earned her MPA from American University with a certificate in women, policy, and political leadership. Xiao, can you answer that same question? Why are you so interested in the topic of this forum today?
Thank you, Dr. Madsen and Nubia, for hosting this wonderful conversation. Thrilled to join all of my colleagues here on this topic that I personally, and I think everyone else here, is very passionate about. And I'll take Dr. Hill's lead on making this personal, the response. I identify as Native Hawaiian, Filipino, Chinese, Irish, and Spanish descent. I am raising a daughter who is half Black. And in my extended family, essentially every race, ethnicity, multicultural background, you name it, is represented. And as Susan, to your point, my background is in politics. So getting more women elected to public office and serving in political leadership roles. And just recognizing, working in a lot of these women's leadership circles and conversations, the women of color's experience is different. And so it's one thing to kind of group all of us together in the women's group, right, under that one identity. And it's another to splice it out. And thank you so much, Susan, for this data. Is so, so, so important based on race and ethnicity. And as we dive into those conversations, we'll see the differences and disparities that exist. And we need to develop and design our strategies moving forward accordingly. And just wanted to add with regards to politics, one thing that I would also oftentimes hear in these conversations is women are the largest voting demographic in America, which is true. But then my response to them, I laugh, right, jokingly. Good luck getting all women to agree on one particular policy, right? And so we have to, again, recognize the diversity that exists amongst us women.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Xiao. And so then with our next panelist, I have the deep pleasure of introducing Lillian Tsosie-Jensen, born Yellow Woman. She's a member of the Dene Nation, and her clan is Bitterwater, born for the Danish people. Lillian is best known for her services on the Utah Education Task Force for Native American Alaskan Native Education, the Governor's Native American Summit, and the Governor's Task Force for Women in Education. She's also a member of the Coalition of Minority Advisory Committee, Indian Walk-In Center, the Utah School Counseling Association, the Utah Coalition of Childhood Protection, the Utah Attorney General Safety and Crisis Tip, Safe Utah Commission. We also have Lillian, who is an award-winning educator. Lillian currently serves on the Governor's Multicultural Commission, where I have the deep pleasure of collaborating and having her support there. And she's worked with Restoring Ancestral Winds Coalition. So as you can see, incredibly accomplished women on our panel today. So Lillian, if I can turn that question to you, why are you interested and passionate about the status and experience of women of color in Utah?
First of all, my thanks to every single one of you on this panel, but especially you, Susan, for leading this work, and Nubia, your introduction doesn't even sound like me, so thank you. You know, it's interesting because I had a response that I was going to talk about data, but I think personalizing this is really key, I think, especially for our listeners. And as you read my bio, it really struck me and my roots and who I am. And being born on the Navajo reservation, the Diné Nation, my grandfather was a tribal leader, and he really instilled in me that leadership component around giving to others. And he worked with other tribal nations to make sure that our people had the support and their basic needs met. And so I think that's what's really instilled in me in all the work that I have done. You know, obviously a heavy background in education. It was always giving back to the students, the children, our community. And so the passion that I have around this research and being in this forum today is really a branch of that. And how can I be of service to others? How can I be of service to my community? And how can I give back to women of color?
Thank you so much. Dr. Paula Smith is a developmental psychology with expertise in school-based prevention in middle and high schools. Her primary research areas lie at the intersection of schools and juvenile justice systems. And the school to prison pipeline, juvenile justice, restorative justice, and access to mental health resources. She's also the principal investigator of a research initiative to improve the quality of doctoral socialization for Black graduate students, addressing ways in which anti-Black racism permeates academia. Dr. Smith is board member for the Society of Prevention Research, the National Prevention Science Coalition, and the chair of the Utah Prevention Research Group. And she advocates for socially just and equitable policies and practices in PK-12 schools and other youth serving agencies. So Dr. Smith, tell us about your interest and passion about this topic as well.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Susan and Nubia. I am so honored to be here. When Susan first approached me about this project, you know, I was like, oh my gosh, we can't just do women. We can't just do women of color. We have to do all of these different racial and ethnic groups because they all have such different experiences. And I was just so glad when Susan and her partners said, yeah, absolutely. That's absolutely what we need to do. So that sparked even more passion in me. And to come from a very personal standpoint, when I joined the College of Education in 2007, I was the first Black tenured professor in the College of Education. And 2007 it's just too late. Like we're too far to have the first Black woman be tenured in the College of Education. So, you know, that is part of my journey is I want to not just be the first and only, I want to bring people along with me, and people of all, women of all, you know, races and ethnicities. So for me, this is truly a passion project. I work with girls in juvenile justice systems. I work with, I'm a troop leader for Girl Scouts. I just really have a passion to make sure that the next generation of girls has, you know, a role model, a pathway that's kind of laid out for them.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. And again, just the reminder that it's important for us to not only open doors, but grow the table and make sure that others are being invited to join. So the opportunities, and I know that we'll dive more into that conversation in just a moment, but rounding up our amazing panelists, I have the deep pleasure of introducing a friend and a sister of mine, Zimin Zhao. She directs the Center for Economic Opportunity and Belonging at the Economic Development Corporation of Utah. In her 13-year career with Salt Lake County, she served as the director of the Mayor's Office for New Americans, where she guided immigrant and refugee integration strategies on the local, state, and national level. Under her leadership, Salt Lake County became the first county in the nation to achieve welcoming certification. Z holds a master's degree in community leadership from Westminster College and is a graduate of the W.K. Kellogg Foundation's Community Leadership Fellowship. She is one of 75 leaders to participate in the 2022-2023 Marshall Memorial Fellowship. I also have the deep pleasure of collaborating with her every single day on a phone call to strategize around closing disparities and addressing inequities. And so again, with deep love and appreciation, I now get to ask you, Z, the question, why are you interested and passionate about the status and experiences of women of color in the state of Utah?
Thank you so much, Nubia, and thank you, Dr. Madsen, for inviting me to be a part of this remarkable panel and discussion today. It's hard to be the last to answer a question that 5 amazing women has already answered. So I would say everything that is said already. This is also deeply personal to me as a woman of color, as an immigrant. And we all acknowledge the intersectionalities of all of the components of race, sex, and our experiences. One thing that I'm really extremely passionate about this particular project is the ability to uplift the voices and experiences of all women. And I think that with the work that we do at the Center for Economic Opportunity and Belonging, one of the things that our core belief is that individuals who are most close to the inequities has to be the solution to addressing the problems. They have to be architects in this solution. And what this project really does is really uplift the experiences of women who are close to the experiences, and those experiences are important. And so this conversation is so dear and near to my heart, and one of the reasons why that I dedicated my life in serving, and it's so great to be a part of this conversation today, and look forward to more discussions to come.
Thank you so much. That was so interesting. I'm so thrilled and honored to have all of you with me today. Just a little framing. First of all, any of you listening in today, you are welcome at any time to put questions in the chat. Those are coming to us as panelists and hosts, but also you can use the Q&A too, and we'll work those in as we can. So that's the first thing. And then secondly, before I ask the first question, just for those that may not be aware, we at the Utah Women in Leadership Project just completed a couple of phases of research on women and women of color in the state of Utah. And we were deeply appreciate being advised by Nubia and her team at the multicultural in the multicultural division, but also Dr. Paula Smith that gave us some coaching and so forth at the first in terms of our status for women. And then Lillian was also involved in the second part. So what we did is, and the questions will be around this, but then we'll go with broader perspectives as well. So we did first, and Jessi was part of this as well, the status reports, trying to gather everything we could on women of color that's been published already, stats on, Jessi will tell us a little bit more of that, so I won't get into that. So we have 5 reports specifically on census categories. So Black, New Americans or Indigenous women, Hispanic, Asian, Pacific Islander. I think I hit all 5. So we have status reports. And then just so you know, we have 6 then community conversation 2-page reports that Lillian helped to lead as well. So we just finished, that's 11 reports, just finished that. And I really felt that it was important for us to discuss this as well as other things that may not be in the reports, because there's limited data. If I can just say it, I'd heard that and I'd looked for that, but I am very much confirmed in my belief that we need more data. So this is my first question to all of you. And Paula, I would love to start with you. And then secondly, Z, why is collecting data and focusing research on women of color important to you and the communities that you represent?
Well, I think, thank you for the question. I think Z actually hit on it to a large degree, and that is that women of colors, their voices, our voices, are collectively not heard as loudly, partially because I think, we're small in numbers, right? But then secondarily, I don't think that our concerns are necessarily brought to the fore. So although I started, in the initial conversations, and I was happy to, sort of be the advisor to kind of, get this pushed, but, some of the things that Lillian, for instance, found in the community conversations are just mind-blowing. I mean, the fact that, we still are grappling with issues around healthcare access, around mental health care access, that, really in this day and age, we should really not be in that state, right? So for me, that's a big part of just allowing these women of color to have voice around, different topics. So for me, that's the central theme.
Thank you. Z, and then Sui Lang, any comments?
Yeah, thank you so much. And just building on Dr. Smith's comments, I think the importance of collecting the data is critical, because we look at data to inform decision making in all levels, right? Whether that's policy, whether that's administrative, and it goes on. And the lack of data that is existing in the community today is one of the reasons why we are unable to come up with the solutions to address the needs in the community. And so the ability to elevate the importance of this data that needs to be collected and is not there is so extremely important. So thank you, Dr. Madsen and everyone else who's involved in this report. I really do hope that this is the beginning and not the end, and that your work in this space will inspire others to do more in collecting the data and collecting the experiences. And it's the combination of the quantitative and qualitative data that give us the platform to be able to do the work that's necessary to move the needle, so that we're truly making the impact that we need to make. The other one piece I really want to also emphasize is the disaggregation of data. Oftentimes we put all of us in this one category, and over again we hear from community members that we're not the same. Not all women are the same. All women of color are the same. Not all Asian women are the same. And so the ability to even dig deeper into it and being able to disaggregate the data based on our experiences, in addition to race and ethnicities, is I think is one of the key components to doing this work.
Thank you so much, because that is one thing that just hit me, especially when I was doing the end work refining of the Asian one. And it said, I can't even remember now, I should have glanced, but it said like so many different Asian communities within our broad Asian. So I kept feeling a little guilty, like we're seeing these results, but I know from interacting with the Micronesian women's groups in the state and women from, China, and that their lives are so different. So yes, Z, I think this is our first step, but we actually know more about what we don't know from this. Sui Lang, and then I'd love to go over to Lillian.
Thank you, Dr. Madsen. I just want to respond and build upon what my colleagues have already shared. Data. I would not describe myself as the data person, but I want to be BFFs with all the data people, because data drives policy. And coming from the policy arena, we need that data to make our arguments about pushing specific policies. In addition to that, looking at quantitative and qualitative data, I am more along the qualitative data type of person. It's the personal narratives, it's the storytelling, it's all of those pieces. Data always tells a story, but it never tells the full story, right? And so it's important to incorporate both. I'm always suggesting a hybrid of the quantitative and the qualitative data to make our arguments when pushing policies that impact women, specifically women of color. Also on disaggregating of data, Susan, just want to give you props for separating Asian women from Pacific Islander women. We are generally lumped together and our experiences are vastly different. So thank you so much for doing that. Also wanted to give a shout out to the Kim Gardner's Policy Institute and their Diversity in Utah data book that Zions Bank commissioned them to produce. I want to just send everybody there. And this work that you're doing, Dr. Madsen, is so important because it takes the foundational information across the state and all segments of our population to the next level in really taking it, splicing it out with the gender and ethnic piece of it. So again, we can develop more effective policies.
Thank you so much. And Lillian, we're going to talk about, I'm excited to have you talk in just a few minutes about your experience in the community, running community conversations. But yeah, a response to this initial question on data and why you think it's important and so forth.
I love what the panelists and my colleagues have already said. Suing the data, absolutely, because every piece of data has a story. And I think, later on when you have some questions for me about some of the listening sessions, I'll talk about that a little bit more. But you also need to realize from my point of view that there are some challenges on the data collection, especially for our American Indian and Alaskan Native communities, because we're a population that's really apprehensive about data collection. So I'm not really sure that we have all the information that we need to serve and support my community. And so therefore the listening sessions were so critical for this work. And the listening sessions gave us a way to collect informal data and to really hear the stories of women of color across the state and in the communities. Also just thinking about my own population, American Indian, Alaskan Native, the numbers in comparison to the other racial ethnic groups are much smaller. And so when you look at reports and data and stats, sometimes the N size is less than 10. So we're not even recognized in some of the data reports, yet I exist, we're still here. And so I want to have that I want my community to have a voice, as they should, and not just because of the humanity of it, but for the sovereignty of it.
Thank you so much. And I'm actually, Jessi, we're not going to forget you, Dr. Hill, but I'm going to shift it over to Nubia for the next question.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Madsen. And then just really quickly, Lillian, thank you so much for affirming that data collection, while critical, is also challenging for Latina communities within our undocumented families. They are apprehensive and they do fear submitting any information, but creating safe spaces of dialogue to collect those stories are critical. So thank you so much for lifting that up. And so Dr. Hill, you had an opportunity to work and collaborate with Maren Christensen on the UWLP team to be able to generate 3 research snapshots. We'd love for you to be able to answer the question that we shared. Why is data collection so important? But also then tell us overall, what was your learning experience in terms of being involved in this work? What was the most relevant or what resonated with you the most?
Okay, thank you. I think if I'm answering the question about the data first, the biggest thing for me, the most important part of the data collection that we did was the data we didn't collect. To be able to say to the community, here's this handful of information we have, and there's so much that we don't know. Dr. Smith was amazing in putting together a list of so many items that we could look for and try to find information about, and we couldn't even get past a third of those items on the list. There's just so much to know. There's so much missing. There's so much need. And I think it's really a clarion call to action for the research community to pull together, gather what data we can, and then contextualize it with these community conversations. They can't stop now. These need to be ongoing community conversations that span years, because folks don't want to disclose sometimes in a way where a record could be tracked back to them. I really want to emphasize that our other panelists say. That's just so important to remember. And as I worked across the snapshots, I had the honor to be able to work across 3 for folks from my background, Latinas, and for Asian American women And for the life of me, because I'm nervous being recorded, I can't remember the last one, but there was another one. I was really surprised at some of the disparities that I saw. I think Susan and I sort of resonated on one. Under basic needs, there are folks going without water today in 2022 in Utah, no water. And that makes me a little emotional because it makes me kind of mad that there are folks without their basic needs being met. And that speaks to me about the systemic nature of these issues that we're facing. I can't fix one and think that this independent single item will solve the rest of the problems. I could fix the water issue, but that's not going to solve access to healthcare. I could fix access to healthcare, but that's not going to solve the problem of the pay gap. And they're all interconnected. Folks who are in jobs that are lower paying, maybe they don't have as many benefits. Even if we could get them access to healthcare, how do we get them time off of work in a way that doesn't harm them financially? So that was something that I noticed looking across all of these things. It was interesting to me, some of the health outcomes that I noticed for my particular group as a Latina. I noticed that, birth rates are higher. That's great. But so are some of the negative outcomes that come with it, like gestational diabetes is also higher. Postpartum depression also higher. Less likely to have some of those preventative screenings. And when those screenings do take place, there are some more negative health outcomes. And just the pay gap in general, I want to highlight that everywhere I can. Utah women in general, what is it, 70 cents on the dollar? And for some of our groups, as low as, 49 cents on the dollar. And none of them got close to the 70 cents on the dollar that women make. So I think that was another big takeaway for me, is just there are huge gaps and they're unseen gaps. You can't look at someone and think, oh, that person makes 43 cents on the dollar compared to this other person. And so being mindful of things that are unseen, that are impacting people deeply and causing them to struggle. So those are some of my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Brilliant, Dr. Hill. Thank you so very much for that. And just so you know, we have been definitely collaborating closely at the governor's office with Dr. Madsen at UWLP. And hopefully, Dr. Madsen, and hearing this conversation, we may need to do another forum where we can provide some updates about the progress we are making. And so with that, I would really love to now turn it to Sui Lang, Lillian, Z, and Dr. Smith. You all had an opportunity to also read the reports. We'd love to hear what were some of the things that stood out to you. Again, what resonated for you, what was most relevant, what was most impactful, and what do you want to elevate on this very public forum that will be available for folks to view later? Sui Lang, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Nubia. And I just want to start by thanking both of you for challenging us to educate ourselves. Everyone here on this panel is highly educated, but it's a continuous effort. And so as we are studying the data and these snapshots, brilliant job. I just love the format and everything. Loved how you broke down the Utah statistics right next to the US statistics. So helpful. I just wanted to share a couple of things that just came top of mind. And what I did was put together just a little cheat sheet for myself. PI, Native American, Hispanic, Black, African American, then Asian, and put specific statistics next to those, and then compared them to Utah women overall on 4 areas. The first one was marriage. And this was really interesting to me, looking at marriage rates, right? Women of color who have never been married compared to women who are married. In some categories, never been married is much higher than the married statistic. And then Utah, recognize Utah has the strongest economy in the country. We also have the highest marriage rate in the nation as well. So 57% of Utah women are married in the US compared to the US, which is 49%. We have to recognize that that contributes to a family's overall economic well-being. And just wanted to share this, there's a Forbes article called Why Marriage is Good Economics back in 2015. And I think it's worth reading because a lot of the points that are laid out in there are still applicable today. So I found that just real interesting and fascinating, the marriage piece of it. When it comes to healthcare, overwhelming majority of women of color still are either uninsured, or the main barrier to health insurance is cost. So looking at those disparities, also recognizing the largest demographic of each of those categories, their professions are health and education. So I found that so fascinating, right? If that is where women of color are pursuing careers, maybe we could take a look at how can we increase salaries or the pay gap, or, you know what I mean, higher paying jobs within the industries that they are choosing to pursue. When it comes to education, again, it's very similar disparities exist, but looking at the correlation between higher education and higher paying jobs, right? One statistic that specifically stood out to me was the Hispanic women. 25% do not have a high school diploma. They are not graduating from high school. That really stood out to me, and it was significantly higher than any of the other categories. And then I looked at median income. And Susan would love clarification around what these mean, median income versus median household income. Was that women as individual professionals compared to household, which was partnerships, marriage? Is that what that was? Okay.
So Jessi was actually the one that really put that data together. So Jessi, real quick, do you want to mention that? Or Dr. Hill? I'm trying to call you Dr. Hill.
You Dr. Hill me once. Everybody knows you can call me Jessi. It's totally fine. But yeah, that's what we have with the individual versus anybody contributing to a household, which could be a partner, which could be children who are working as well.
Okay, thank you so much for that clarification. Significant difference between those two categories, meaning women alone are making peanuts here in the state of Utah compared to, and then seeing the big jump, household, whether it be a husband or a partner or children, are making either significantly more than they are. But again, going back to the family unit, right? When we can preserve the institution of family, everyone does better economically. But just looking at those statistics, and also recognizing Utah's median household income is $70,000, over $70,000, almost $71,000 compared to the US, which is $59,000. So again, to me, right, that says men in Utah are making good money, you know? And so how can we bring women up to par with that? I'll stop there.
Thank you so very much, Sui Lang. Lillian, I'd love your thoughts on what resonated for you and what would you like to elevate in this discussion?
Well, I think for Sui Lang, I would just have to say ditto, because she spoke so well to that. But, you know, having participated in the listening sessions and knowing that reoccurring theme of education and mental health needs, I would have to kind of point out from my community in the status reports, the educational attainment that I found very interesting. So as you look at the status of Utah American Indian women report, nearly 51% of American Indian Alaskan Native women have a high school diploma or less in comparison to all Utah women that have the same educational attainment, which was, I believe it was close to 31%. So basically a 20% gap, which is a huge disparity. And so I thought that was very interesting, especially knowing that in the listening sessions, how important education was to all these women as we listen to their stories. And I could speak more to that. I want to make sure everyone on the panel has a lot to say around this, that their voice is heard. But it's certainly an area that we need to focus on and make sure that we have the resources to our communities and to our women of color.
And thank you so much, Lillian. And I know that we're going to be asking you here in just a moment, what was your experience facilitating some, you know, in-person discussions? And so we're going to be able to dive in more deeply. So thank you, Lillian, for those thoughts and comments. Z, love to have you share right now. What would you like to say?
Yeah, in addition to what Lillian and Sui Lang already share, a couple other things that stood out to me in addition to that. One is that insurance rates between Hispanic women and Black women. We're looking at 33% for Latina women in terms of insurance rates. And I think that correlates with what's happening when we combine it with the experience report, the unawareness of resources out in the community. I think one of the keys on it. The other thing that really stood out to me, we know that in Utah has continue to be ranked as they rank last in terms of disparities based on sex. And what resonated with me even more is that when you look at the disparities between women of color and the white women overall, and specifically looking at Black women and how they are doing in terms of the wealth and income they have in the community. And this is astonishing. And this in relations to also the report that the Kempsey Garner Policy Institute has released last year based on race and sex and ethnicity. The widest gap between the income wealth between Black and whites is actually, Utah is ranked #1 in terms of the disparities. And so just seeing that translating into this particular report just as additional urgency in terms of what we want to do. And the third thing I really want to highlight, and I already mentioned this early on, looking at data on Asian women in the community, we know that they're doing well overall in terms of all of the measurements. But again, I want to caution us that Asia and the need to disaggregate those data, even between the Asian communities, because the Asian community is so big and so diverse, more so than I think all of the other ethnicities. So the need to be able to think deeper into this aggregation of data and do not assume that just because overall Asians are doing well, it's not translate to all Asians.
Thank you so much, Dee. And again, the need to disaggregate that data and make sure that we're understanding the unique experiences of even the diversity that exists within the diverse communities that we're discussing. So excellent. Dr. Smith, how would you like to share, what would you like to share about your insights about these reports?
Well, first of all, I want to thank everyone who worked on the reports. I realized that the list of items that I gave to Susan initially, Susan, I think it was 4, 5, 6 pages long. Like, no, we should look at domestic violence and this and this and this. You know, because everybody knows I'm an and person, not an or, right? But I was just really starting like amazed at how much data was actually available, because I thought these reports were going to be really very, very thin. And so I applaud the efforts of everyone who worked on these reports and you know, sopped through all the data. So for me, there were a couple of things. One, of course, you know, the education, right? But the wage gap was the thing that hit me the hardest. And, you know, there's always this sort of debate around women and the wage gap in terms of childbearing and out of workforce and all of that. But, you know, when you come down to it, you know, there's probably more than this. I'm not an economist. I don't know this for, I don't have data to back this up. But, you know, when you look at the kinds of occupations that women typically engage in, they don't tend to be the STEM or, you know, business fields. So if we're in healthcare and education, as has been mentioned before, you know, what are ways in, you know, so now that we have some of this data, what are solutions? Where can we move this to? So, you know, Lillian talked a little bit about the, you know, increasing the wages in some of those areas. And I think the other panelists have as well. So that was one of the things that struck me. The second thing, and this was specific to, well, actually it wasn't specific, which was the lack of insurance among many of these groups, which leads to an increase in the severity of medical problems once they are diagnosed, right? So we have, you know, certainly a lack of healthcare workers, you know, doctors who are women of color, but at the next level, we also have, you know, people that are not able to access doctors in a timely fashion. and then go to doctors once there is a severe problem. So when you look at cervical cancer rates as an example among Black women, that was just incredible to me that, women are not only having cervical cancer, but also, coming in with more severe rates once they are diagnosed. So, there's clearly something broken in the medical system and in the insurance system as well. So,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. I appreciate all these comments. We're going to shift now into, so like I said before, we did some stats reports, and Paula, I was surprised at how little there were, but I think your expectation was that there was going to be nothing, and you were surprised that there was at least a start, right? That was the first phase. And the second was to go deeper. Before we go deeper, I'm going to have Lillian talk. I want to give a shout out to one of our team members, Maren Christensen, who really did the coordination work for our team, was totally awesome. Worked on the community or on the status reports with Jessi and others who were doing that, but also worked with and attended all 11 community conversations. Lillian, I would like to shift over to you. So you and Maren from my team, as I mentioned, hosted 11 community conversations where you listen to women of color from around the state, and you'll tell me more. We have 6 summary reports that were created. Tell us a little bit about what you did and why you felt it was so important.
First of all, I just want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to be a part of this process. I feel so honored. And especially as I look at the panel group here, you guys are just amazing, authentic women of color who are outstanding. And I just feel so in awe to be a part of this today. But the listening sessions were incredibly intense and emotional and moving. And that's the part that I somewhat crave as we look at kind of the head and the heart, and the head being the data piece, the heart being the listening sessions. And so what we did is we looked at the disaggregated groups under the federal reporting, and we had these listening sessions with each of the groups of women of color. We were very mindful about the demographic data in Utah as we set up the sessions across the state. And with the help of community outreach coordinators, we organized 2 sessions per disaggregated group, as well as 1 session for women of refugee in their community. And the sessions were held in the evening, and they were approximately an hour and a half to 2 hours in length. However, I will tell you there were a few that went a lot longer than that. The sessions were designed to listen to and to learn from women of color in the various communities across Utah, and with the goal in mind that their words and their stories would be used to gain understanding of their barriers, their needs, their assets, but then also to help educate and influence policymakers. And I hope that's where the next level will begin. As for the importance of these listening sessions, the notable reason of the why is to recognize women of color for their qualities of leadership and kinship. And kinship is so important, especially in my community. And that leadership and kinship in their own individual communities and family and within their race and ethnicity. And in each of these sessions we heard, and this is what the heart this tugged at my heart. Sorry. In each of the sessions we heard, this is the first time anyone has recognized us or wanted to hear from us. And those were the first words that we heard as we gathered these women. And so I just felt so in awe as I listened to their stories. For some of these women, this was the first time that they had a voice or a seat at the table. And as we listened to these stories of these women, I could hear my own story in each of their voices. And in each of the listening sessions, I heard an overwhelming feeling of, I haven't had a voice in my own life. And they felt like they didn't have a voice in the decision-making of their children's lives. They talked a lot about their children and making sure that their children had the future that they had hoped for and wanted. And I heard feelings of a lack of a sense of belonging in the conversation, that there was a need for their voices to be heard. And as a woman of color, I feel and I believe, and I've experienced that lack of recognition as a person. So in each of the sessions, I was inspired. It was inspiring. I was empowered. I felt my own sense of empowerment, and I hope that they did too. And as I said earlier, very emotional to hear these stories of these beautiful women and their souls. It just felt like there was this strong connection of being. And at the end of every evening, and this is the piece that I absolutely loved, there was this bond of sisterhood because they had been heard and they felt connected. And that piece of feeling connected is so vital and so important as we move forward in this work. And not that feeling of not being alone, but that there's a hope, such a great hope, that policymakers will utilize this work as a starting point to help them eliminate the barriers for our women of color, what their experience, and find ways and measures to support them. And I guess the last thing I would say, and certainly if there are questions, I'm happy to address, but to have these women trust us. And when I say us, I'm talking about Maren, because again, a shout out to Maren Christensen. Love her. She jumped in this wholeheartedly and we grew together.
As a white woman, white woman.
She is just incredible. She has such an old soul, and she just jumped into this, just trusting me and trusting the women in the circle. And we met in a circle. And it's just such an amazing, even our road trips were amazing, but the nights that we were there with these women and for them to trust us with their stories and their words was incredibly moving. I just wish in some ways others could experience this moment, this truth of listening to their stories and having them feel empowered by sharing their stories and that connection within the circle.
Thank you so much. One thing before, I know Nubia is going to take over, but I just want to have us look at time. So we want to kind of move through a number of other topics pretty quick. So we probably won't have everybody answer, just maybe a couple on those. But Lillian, thanks so much for sharing that background. Just one thing I don't think you mentioned, that even though a number were on the Wasatch Front, you also had a road trip down to southern Utah and out east, right? Eastern Utah, I think. So, and up in Ogden and just a few areas across the state. I think that was important too. And I know that was one of your ideas as well, Lillian.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Lillian, for sharing that. And again, to invite other individuals to potentially curate spaces where that sisterhood and that connection and that space of storytelling can be generated, because as you're mentioning, people are craving it, right? This is something that they're asking for. But again, what was so special about the work that UWLP did in partnership with all of you is that it's creating an opportunity for us to use this platform to talk about the need to continue the work and then to create solutions. So really exciting. Now, one of the things, Lillian, that also came up from the listening sessions was the lack of mental health support. Anxiety, depression, and crisis, trauma was a consistent narrative that across every single racial and ethnic diverse background, women touched on. And so again, we don't have time to ask every single one of the panelists. However, who is really passionate about this issue? Dr. Smith, I would tap you in here, especially because you've worked with our young girls in the system. You've worked with adult women. You understand a lot of the context behind the need for culturally responsive mental health. What are your thoughts about what we heard and what can we potentially do here?
So I should say at the outset that I'm not a clinician. I am a developmental psychologist, which means that I research mostly. But, in terms of mental health, I think that one of the things that came out very strongly in the reports and mostly in the listening sessions is that I think that people sort of discount the role that racism plays in one's mental health. And And, you know, I'm just going to do a short plug for my husband's work. Dr. William Smith does some really great work on racial battle fatigue, and looks at the ways in which racism really affects people's physical health and mental health. So I think that that was one of the things that I really appreciated about the listening sessions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Smith. Anyone else truly just want to chime in here before we transition to Susan with the next question? Dr. Hill?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, Lillian, you first, please.
Well, and maybe Jessi, you can add into this. I just wanted, because I thought maybe Paula might mention this, the subject came up around code switching, and it's such a piece that when we look at the data and research, that it does have an effect on your psychological being. And so just that piece of code switching, I think, is very important. And I'm just going to do a shout out for that. I know we could go way deep into that, but I don't know, Jessi, if you're going to talk a little bit more about that, if you want to add to that.
I wanted to add to just mental health in general. So if you want to talk a little bit more about code switching, I can wait a minute.
Well, and just really quickly, because I don't want to take away from everyone's time, but it came up in the listening sessions over and over again, and it really played to every individual's well-being, this piece that they had to code switch back and forth between mainstream and their family and their culture. And many of our communities feel this same thing as they try to navigate mainstream society, and it does have an effect on your mental well-being, as well as that daily microaggression. So just a note that did come out in the listening sessions.
And I just wanted to chime in for a second on the need for, not only the need for mental health care. I threw in the chat a link to UVU's Community Mental Health Clinic, because we offer free mental health services to uninsured and underinsured people. So please call if you need any assistance. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is a need, and I have no idea how to solve this problem, but just looking at the mental health training programs that we have at UVU and the students there, you know, a lot of them are white, which is wonderful. That's great. But when we think about people of color who want to see someone like them in that role, to be able to talk to them, to be able to understand them, it's a problem. We have a lot of difficulty recruiting people of color into our graduate programs. And I think that speaks to this sort of educational pipeline issue as well. But I just wanted to throw that out there and encourage anybody who's listening who happens to be a person of color, consider entering a mental health field. It's so needed right now.
I think that is so important. Just this morning, I was filming a recording on career exploration for girls on engineers, and we had such a hard time getting a woman of color engineer. And we're like, we need women of color in so many different areas. So Z and Sui Lang, I'd love to engage you too in this next one. And Z, you've worked specifically on resources, right? And that was a thing that came up in every one of the community conversations as well, the lack of resources that they see generally, but for them in their communities of color and so forth. So I'd love any thoughts you have, Z, and then Sui Lang as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Susan Madsen. And I think this is an important piece. This is the work that I really do at the Center for Economic Opportunity and Belonging, is trying to find ways to get resources to it, but specifically from a philanthropic and private sector investment angle. How do we better invest in our communities? And what really resonated with me, especially with the experiences of the reports that was published, is how much the community inherently knows how to solve their problems and how to come up with solutions in addressing it. And I think that a lot of what we really need to do is do more listening and more investing in the existing assets that's there in the communities. And so I really, really do want to lift it up as one of the the priorities as we move forward in terms of what are the next steps. We know that the inequity exists. We know that there are assets. How do we get resources to get to them? And a couple other things I want to lift up as well, in addition to what I just said. One is awareness of resources that's out there. And so being able to educate the community about the resources. But that is also another disconnect that I think we have. Oftentimes we have resources that does not resonate with the community because we're not funding the resources that are culturally and linguistically relevant to our community members, and investing in that space of building up the capacities of a community to reach those resources in a way that's meaningful to them is another aspect of it that I think is important as well. So I think that there's a lot of work for us to do, but this is something that I think we need to really think about in terms of how do we get the resources in need. And the last thing I really, and then I'll pass it to Sui Lang. We also did a list of listening sessions through the center, and similar themes that came out of all of this. The other important piece in terms of resources and how we can support the community is this idea of coalition building. And I think a lot of the panelists already brought that up, the importance of sisterhood, the importance of bringing people together who are doing the work together. Inherently, that has the strength. And so the investments beyond just direct services to a community, the investment into building up leaders within a community, the investment to bring us together so that as a whole, we can work together as a coalition to advance those things that we know works, I think are the keys.
I love that. Thank you. Sui Lang, any thoughts?
Thank you so much. I wholeheartedly agree with everything you shared. Also want to acknowledge Paula, Jessi, and Lillian's comments around mental health, racism, right? That is what women of color experience in Utah, that other women who do not identify as women of color may not, the way that we do, and that is absolutely mentally exhausting, right? And mental health, just want to recognize the impact it has on every other issue, especially economic well-being. In terms of resources, one thing I learned in Washington, and this is a deep passion of mine, diversity in media. And so looking at how are we getting that information to multicultural communities? One way that we could do is, I describe as like a backward mapping approach. Looking at multicultural communities, where are they getting their information about resources and things that available to them? Because I would argue, as I've been running in these circles for about 5 years now, we have so many resources. There are so many programs, initiatives. Even Zions Bank has a number of products and services available to minority-owned businesses that they just don't know about yet. And so if we could do maybe some research there, asking them, where do they get their information? How do they get their information, right? Is it specific media outlets? Are there specific programs, radio, television, speaking, speaker series or things like that that they go to? In addition to that, community leaders. And in my experience, a lot of ethnic and minority communities get their information from trusted community leaders, whether they be in business, private sector, public sector, government, elected officials, or even in their faith communities, right? Their pastors, ministers, bishops, things like that. How can we get these information about resources to them, pass them on? Also, I think the topic of boards, right, came up in conversation earlier, diversity on our boards. Our boards in, again, public, private sector would love to integrate more women and women of color into those roles so they could, again, turn to their communities, respective communities, and share all of these resources that we have available.
Thank you so much. And Nubia, I know you have so many thoughts going on, so take a minute, just you, because, I know your team has probably collected some of this, and I would love to have you also just quickly mention the grant program that's just come up for women-owned businesses and people of color and so forth. Would love to have you take a minute.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and I don't want to take away time from our expert panelists. And again, I just recognize that this conversation around resources is critical, and there are, as Sui Lang mentioned, so much out there. And just to highlight a couple, the Governor's Office of Economic Opportunity, we worked in partnership on the One Utah Roadmap, UWLP, the Women's Business Center of Utah, to launch a new campaign, and it's called Inspire Utah, which is focusing on elevating the narratives, the stories, the resilience, the grit, the power, the ability, and the potential of women who want to start their businesses, return to the workforce, or potentially who want to serve in positions of leadership as CEO. And what it's trying to do is change the narrative that women have to choose one or the other. If you want to stay at home and rear family, that's a beautiful choice. But we want to be able to elevate the fact that it's a choice and there are pathways to entering and engaging in the labor market. And so this campaign has launched, but there's also, it's not just a fuzzy campaign. There's $69 million that are coming into the state of Utah through the Utah State Small Business Credit Initiative that is directly targeting small and diverse businesses, women-owned businesses, veteran, rural, LGBTQ, people with disability, folks that have existed at the margins and who have not been able to access capital. This program is specifically going to help address those gaps. So again, a lot of opportunities. If you want to understand more, learn more, please reach out to us. You can also sign up for the multicultural newsletter where we include a lot of these resources. You could email us. But again, as I mentioned, I really think there's an opportunity, Dr. Madsen, for us to do a follow-up discussion around what is happening, especially as we are celebrating today, Hispanic Heritage Month, felicidades, but also in October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, right? There is an opportunity for us to talk about there are gaps. How do we fill them? How do we not forget about our immigrant and linguistically diverse individuals? How do we make sure that we are talking about Westwater Project and what that meant to the people that, as Dr. Hill mentioned in the beginning, had no access to running water, but for the first time ever, we now have infrastructure that has been invested in the state. I get very passionate about this, y'all, but things are happening, things are moving, and it is because of good people like each and every one of you on this call and listening in, and together we can do more. So let's stay connected, plugged in, build sisterhood, build coalition, build community to make Utah a better place to live. And so with that, Dr. Madsen, do you want to close us out?
Yeah, what I would love to do though, just if we can have each of you, I've got two other quick things I want, but if we can be just really concise, don't you like how I say we, you and me can be really concise, that would be awesome. Just in a sentence or two, when you looked at those community conversation, we've talked about resources, we've talked about mental health, just list maybe one other thing that came up that really caught your attention. And I put in the chat those links so people will, to the reports will think about those. So Paula, can you just list one other thing you think was an important finding quickly?
Sure. I think that it was shocking to me that someone in the community conversation said that one of the reasons that we have issues around race in Utah is because basically white people don't want to be labeled as racist because they equate racist with being bad people, when they, really need to look at it beyond this, like good or bad. Like, do you have racist ideology is really where we need to start thinking about rather than good or bad. It's just, do you have racist practices or racist ideology that's preventing you from really fully embracing the fact that Utah is changing demographically?
I love that, Paula, just because, I've worked for years to teach unconscious bias and I continue to learn. And what I've realized is no matter how much I know about women and gender, I'm still sexist. Because we have so much unconscious. I'm still racist, but I'm trying. I'm still, Sui Lang and I kind of go back and forth on that. We're still, and so it's not, we can't shame each other. We just have to all work towards moving things forward. Jessi, Dr. Hill, I'm terrible about that today. Jessi, one quick thought on something that stuck out of those community conversation reports.
Can I be tangential and tell another conversation that I had with someone, because I think I'm just going to do that.
Okay.
I had the opportunity to speak with a business owner in the community who's a woman, and I will try to protect her identity because she had a really interesting experience when she went to apply for a job. and you'll recognize that these questions are illegal. Okay. They asked her, oh, well, are you married? And she said, no. Are you living with someone? And she's like, yeah, I am living with my boyfriend. Are you planning on having children soon? And by that point, she kind of was like, oh, I'm not sure that's any of your business. And they ended up hiring her, which was great, but they were giving her 30% less than an equivalent role that a man was in. And so I just want to point out there that people are thinking that they're being nice, coming back to this idea of nice and racism and sexism, because they're trying to be nice to find, oh, well, there's probably a man who has a family and who needs these wages to support their family. But going back to what Sui-Ling was talking about earlier with the marriage rates, I think it's really important to advocate to reduce the wage gap, to be really intentional about women's salaries. And that's something we all need to do together. It's not just women fighting this fight, but we need men to fight this fight with us, because the woman who had this conversation with me, her male colleague was the one who figured it out and advocated for her to get a raise, which worked for her. So that's my 2 cents, which was
Thank
totally
you.
tangential. Sorry, Susan.
It was good. I love it. Z, let's have you go next, then Sui-Ling, and we'll finish up with Lillian.
And it's so hard to choose one, Dr. Madsen. But the one I think I'm going to talk about and go piggyback on Dr. Smith and others as well is that this work needs to be doing it in an intentional way. And I hear from the report and went over and over again about the intentionality of doing this work. Why are we doing it? Why are we doing it just to address the service needs? Are we really care about the people and care about the actual change that is going to happen as we do this? And so I think that one thing really that stood out for me with the work that is being done, the report that's being published, is how intentional this has been, and that we're seeing this not just a one-time fix, that this is a systemic issues, and systemic issues takes time and patience to do it, and we have to think about the long-term strategies and the intentionality that we put into this work.
Thank you so much, Sui-Ling.
Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you, Jessi, for sharing that experience. Yes, things like this do happen today. And so just want to reiterate that, be mindful of that. And I guess I'm going to choose an easy one. Looking at the different professions that women in Utah, women of color, have chosen to pursue, banking and financial services industry. We need more women in banking and financial services. Utah ranks 4th in the nation in terms of asset management. Our banking financial services industry is thriving. People literally move to the state to pursue careers in our industry. And so I want to encourage all of you, and also use this as a plug for Women in Money Conference that's starting tonight and will be all day tomorrow. Please join Dr. Madsen, Nubia, myself, and I hope all of my colleagues here at that convening. It'll be all day tomorrow at the Sheraton. And start building your network with other women in this industry. And hey, if you're looking for a change, happy to plug you in, happy to make connections. Take a look at Zions Bank. We're hiring right now. If you see an opportunity that aligns with your skill set and experience, reach out to me. I will put you directly in touch with it.
We're going to cut this piece out. No, I'm
okay.
Just joking.
I mean, whatever. That's me taking a shameless plug.
I love it. I love it. And Lillian.
Thank you. I want to be quick, but I feel like there's so much to be said because I had the advantage of being in the listening sessions. These women of color came from the perspective of their own children and motherhood, and what did they want for their children and their future. And one of the pieces that we haven't really talked about was culture, and that came up in the listening sessions. And a few years back, I worked with College Board on a report that was young men of color. And they talked about catalysts for change for these young men of color who were not graduating from high school. And one of the catalysts for change was knowing and understanding culture. And that's what I heard also in these listening sessions from these moms, these women. They wanted their children to understand culture and their own culture. And they felt like some of that was, in a sense, dying or going away. And so I would just say, what are those resources that we can put out there that help support our families and our mothers, to help them with their children, to have them understand culture so that they have that catalyst for change and that connection to community.
Thank you so much. And Nubia, any final thoughts before I close us out?
just briefly, I want to again thank all of the individuals that have joined us today. And there's a lot of comments and they're affirming the comments that were made from each of our panelists. So it really seems like the discussion resonated. I would just encourage you all to think about your own roles in leadership. How are you reflected in state and local government? Are you thinking about running for office? Are you wanting to serve on a board? Are you interested in getting engaged in one of these organizations that are doing great research, but are also looking to take it to that next step around solutions? So please reach out to us, know that we're a resource, and a lot of things are happening. And our role really is to make sure that people are informed so that you can be brand ambassadors of the good work that is happening. And so people are hopeful that we're in fact taking into consideration the narratives, the voices, the barriers that are shared with us. And it's not just a report, but in fact, it's an inspiring opportunity for us to do better as we serve the state of Utah. And so with that, Dr. Madsen, always a pleasure to co-moderate. Thank you so much for inviting all of us and sharing space. And thank you to everyone that's joined us today. We love and appreciate you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Paula, Jessi, Lillian, Sui Ling, Z, thanks so much for joining us today. One of the questions, just real quick, that we didn't get to that I think would be a valuable conversation in the future is how can I or my sister, white sisters, be better allies to women of color? And so I'm just opening that. That's a whole nother conversation, right? Thanks to our sponsors, the Utah Education Network, the John M. Huntsman School of Business, and USU Extension for making this event possible. So thank you again to the panelists and all of you who have attended today. Have a wonderful rest of your day.